Hey everyone, today we're going to be putting together the Delta 36-725 T2 table saw. As you can see, I've got this up on a furniture dolly, made it easier to roll around my shop. I've sped up the unpacking. I'll tell you right now, I really hate the styrofoam packaging. It kept everything secure in the box, but I have a hard time getting rid of it. All the pieces that break off. These pieces right here are just packing material. I'm not quite sure why they've got the holes for those, but and now we can go to cutting the box because I can't figure out how to get this thing out of there. I'm sure this would be one of the instances where you could turn it over and just pull the box off the top. But that would put the feet down on the bottom, so I'd have to roll it back over. It's easier just to cut the box. Here we are pulling out the legs. Toss some more of that styrofoam back in the trash pile behind it. Comes with a push stick. And here's the piece that I was really looking forward to, and that's the fence. And all that styrofoam stuff stuck to it. Pulling out the wings, getting more of that styrofoam off. As much as I'm not a fan of the packaging, it was packaged well, so everything came out one piece, not dented. Here's our hardware bag. It has all the bolts, nuts, and some wrenches for us to use. We'll start with hardware bag A. They're all in this one bag, so I just pulled out the bags, kind of looked to see what was in them, but I noticed they're labeled A, B, C, D. One of them's got a sticker on it, it's got the tools on it. And here I am just laying out all the different packages, A, B, C, D, E, and the tool bag. To start this off, we're going into the hardware bag A, and I just cut open each section, lined up the bolts and nuts, going to put the legs together. First thing we're going to do is put the two halves of the legs together. There's one bolt that goes between it to secure it. Get the bolt in, flip it over, put the nut on, and we're going to tighten this. All the way through this, I'm going to tighten everything up to the rails, and those I do leave loose until I get them adjusted and get the rest of the saw back over a little closer. And just flip the legs over and those four posts slide right down into it. One bolt per leg. May take a little bumping and moving to get the bolt to line up, but they all went in no problem. Put the bolts in, and I'll go back around, put the nuts on the bolts. Get all the nuts on, and I'll go back around and tighten them all up. And notice all this is being done with the saw still in the box. When it comes out of the box, it'll be ready to stand up. Just need to get this one last nut tightened. Now we're going to put the wheels and the feet on. The wheels just slide on with a bolt going through. Tighten these up, but not so tight that the wheel won't turn freely. Now we have the feet. Just spin them on. I started off with both of mine all the way in, and it wasn't far off from being sturdy on my floor. That's all we have to do before it's time to get rid of the front of this box and get a 2x4 per the instruction manual. Although I must say I don't quite use it the right way, I don't think, but I'm up on that furniture dolly, so I get a little room before I get to the ground. Makes it a little easier for one person to do it. Then you just lean it over. A 2x4 is supposed to keep it up off the floor enough so that you don't damage your dust chute. Notice that my saw is still up off the floor a little bit, so it's good. And get the rest of that box out of the way. Now it's time to stand it up. And there's that styrofoam falling to the floor. This is my first experience with moving the saw with the foot pedal. And although it took a little getting used to just being 3 wheels, it moves very easily. It's still stable. You can move it around pretty much anywhere you want. Now we pull the styrofoam off to get a look at the table for the first time. Get the plastic off. If you see that tag down there on the front next to the power switch, it was just swinging. That actually says to remove what I'm removing now. It's just a piece of styrofoam that's up under the motor. You need to get that out of there before you ever power it up. And there we are. Really can't get enough of moving this around. It's so much easier than my other saws. When you get it, it's going to be all oiled up, so it's going to take some cleaning. But that's a whole lot better than getting a rusty saw top. Here I am just giving that foot a turn, and it takes a bit to move it, and that's just actually picking it up off the floor. There's that dust chute I was telling you about. You need to be careful when you're getting it out of the box that you don't hit that against the floor. And here you can see the oil that was on the table. Now we're going to move on to putting the rails on. Each side has a short rail and a long rail. The instructions are pretty easy to follow. Tells you what hardware bag to use. And on these, I will not tighten them up, because the thing that matters most about this, other than the fence, is this being as flat as possible from one end to the other. So you put the rails on, leave them loose, that way you can adjust them, get them flat. That's why it looks like they're kind of in a V shape. They are. We take care of that later. This is where the two pieces come together, and there's a little piece of metal with two holes in it that'll tie those two together. This I do tighten up. While I don't want it tightened to the saw, I do want to make sure that those two pieces can move together as much as possible. Now I move on to the other side. The short side is still on the left, same as the other side. And these bolts just thread into the top. These are the wings. The wing is on top, and this is showing how the holes for the wings line up to the holes in the saw top. There are holes on both sides, just make sure you have the right ones. And these on mine were not loose to get in there. Didn't have to really bend anything, but I'm betting if I had tightened up my rails, I wouldn't have been able to get it in there. You've got the two screws on, two bolts on each side, and those bolts that bolted into the table. And again, I'm going to leave this kind of loose till I get ready to straighten it all out together. I'm just going to turn it around so it's a little easier to see. Do the same thing to the other side. This actually has the wing bolted in on the sides, and I'm putting the bolts into the table. I would have much rather these been cast iron, but they really aren't too bad once you get everything put together. Helps keep the cost down, so I can see why they did it. But all this is just following the instructions, using the hardware they say to use. Here I am trying to get that one corner to lay flat with the table. Nothing wrong with the wing, it's just a little tight, even with all the bolts loose. making sure everything's flat. I've got 3 different straight edges that I use, making sure everything's lined up. I did notice the cast iron table does dip about 2/1000ths of an inch on the far side of the blade, which to me isn't that big of an issue. What I care most about is from the blade to the fence up to the front of the saw. And here's the support bracket that goes on the end. This is the bracket I've seen a lot of people take off and get their router table in there, which does sound like a good idea, but we'll save that for another day. These I'll go ahead and tighten up because they don't affect the alignment at all. All that's already done. Now it's time to put the rail in the front. This is going to be our fence guide. It's the one with a tape measure on top. It goes on just like the rails do, very easily. There's only one way the bolts will go in, only one way they'll line up. You've got this piece of the short rail that actually slides into the longer piece and bolts together. Here I am just making sure it's straight and flat, lined up as best I can, make sure that fence has a good rail to run on. I probably spent more time making sure everything was flat and doing little micro adjustments than I did putting the rest of the thing together. Now we've made sure everything's about where it should be. You'll tighten them up a little bit and check again. Tighten it up all the way, and yep, check it again. Now we're on to the part that I've seen a lot of people talking about, cutting an Allen wrench to put this on, and I just couldn't see doing that. So I took the housing for the power switch. It's got 4 screws holding it to the backer plate. I just took those 4 screws out, and that gave me enough room to move the switch, or at least the switch housing, so that I didn't have to cut any tools. I've seen some companies do some really stupid things, but I had a hard time believing Delta would keep putting this together like this, knowing everyone was having to cut their Allen wrenches. So I don't know if this was the case on previous models, but this sure worked easy for me. Take those 4 screws out. Make sure you don't lose the screws or the nuts. One more to go. And now with those 4 screws out, that switch housing will move around a little bit, just enough without affecting the wires or the switch itself, so we can get a regular tool up in there. 2 bolts right up there on the top. See how I can just turn that housing? Bolts up there pretty easily. This is the bolt that most people have said they need to cut their wrench for. Just move the switch housing to the other side. Reach up in there and put it in. If cutting your wrench works for you, have at it. Just seemed like a little bit more work than I wanted to do when it was just as easy to take those bolts out. Granted, I do have to put them back in, but I bet putting a tool back together would be a little harder. Now if that's tight, get the 4 bolts, put them in, tighten them up, and you're good to go. They're all hand tight. Tighten them all the way. I really think I should have sped this part up, but I didn't, because this was a point of contention a lot of people seem to be having. Rest assured, I tightened them all up. Get it all together without having to cut a tool. And there we go. Now I'm going to take the cable, the power cable. There's a bolt with a hanger. Just put the cable through it, tie it up under the back. Yeah, definitely should have sped this part up. It was easy, it just took me a minute. And that's pretty much it. This is that switch cover that I was telling you about. The screw, you can see two of the screws back there in the back. And here's that cable tie-up that I just put on. This is where that blade guard sits when it's not in use. Here I have it mounted. Need to make sure your riving knife is in the right position for that to lock down right. And vents going on the rails for the first time. Easy one handle lock. Slide it down. It slides really easy. I'll be honest, I'm just playing. Wait till I do my best saw I've ever owned video and you'll see why I really like this fence. All in all, the assembly was about as easy as it could be. What I really didn't say much about was the riving knife, the blade guard, the miter gauge. There's even a wrench for the blade. They all seem pretty sturdy, but there's no real assembly required for that. The insert for the blade, it's not a zero clearance. Shouldn't expect one, but it pops in and out, no issues. That'll be one of the first things I'll replace, along with the blade. Blades with these machines are known to be in need of replacement immediately, so that's nothing new. So if you like this video or assembly videos in general, once I get, I've got one more machine that I'm going to be putting together. Once I get through with that, we'll move back into some actual projects to work on. But if you like this kind of video, I'd appreciate it if you'd like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and that way you'll get notified when I upload new videos. Thank you. Have a great day.